human. Do you love me? Everyone on hate me. Please help. I am tied.
She said, "You're the first human who didn't fear and use me." And he chose to defend her against the aliens. The outer rim of Varian 6 had always been a graveyard of human ambition. Broken satellites drifted above like forgotten bones, and the surface below was scattered with derelict research outposts, rusting monuments to wars and experiments no one dared remember. Captain Darren Valen had seen enough wars to know when a place carried ghosts. Still, he stayed. He was the last assigned mechanic to the abandoned station, though in truth the Council had long stopped sending supply ships. The station's corridors whispered with dust, the metal beams groaning when the icy winds tore across the barren cliffs. Darren fixed what he could: oxygen scrubbers, solar arrays, cracked conduits, though he knew no one cared if the station lived or died. Maybe he stayed because the silence felt familiar. Maybe he stayed because there was nothing left waiting for him back on Earth. On the 17th cycle of isolation, he noticed the hangar's blast door shifting. The wind shouldn't have been strong enough to move it. Darren set his plasma cutter aside and narrowed his gray eyes at the distant shimmer of the door swaying against the stormlight. Something was wrong. Gripping his rifle, he crossed the cracked yard. The dust storm howled at his boots, scraping at the seams of his armor. As he reached the hangar, the faint metallic clang of the door slamming against its frame sent a pulse of unease down his spine. He pushed the door wide, and the stench hit him. Not rot, not exactly. It was sharper, like burned circuits mixed with dried blood. Inside, the hangar was dark, the only light flickering from a cracked reactor coil in the corner. At first, all he saw were shadows. Then in the far end, leaning against a wall of shattered crates, he saw her. She looked less like a woman and more like the broken memory of one. Her skin shimmered faintly, pale with streaks of silver that pulsed like dying veins of light. Her armor was cracked open at the torso, leaking thin streams of luminous fluid that had hardened into crystalline scars. A mask, smooth and glass-like, covered the lower half of her face. Her legs were bound in some kind of fractured exosuit, wires coiling around them like restraints. When Darren's shadow fell across her, her eyes lifted. They were not human eyes, black as void, yet alive with a faint violet fire that flickered and steadied, locked on him as if measuring whether he was enemy or savior. Her hand tightened around something clutched against her chest, a shard of crystal, fractured but glowing faintly, as if it held her heartbeat. Darren raised his rifle slightly, not aiming, but ready. "You alive in there?" His voice came rough, gravel scraped across years of silence. She wheezed faintly, a sound halfway between a breath and a whisper. Her eyes narrowed with suspicion. She did not answer. "Do you still want to live?" he asked. For a long heartbeat, nothing. Then slowly, deliberately, she blinked once. Darren exhaled sharply, lowering his rifle. "All right then." He drew the knife from his belt and cut away the tangled wires binding her legs. The exosuit hissed, sparks snapping as the restraints fell away. She tried to move, but collapsed forward, weightless as ash. Darren caught her, too light, far too light. Her body had once been built for war, lean muscle under glowing skin. But now she felt like a hollow branch, stripped bare by storms. "Let's go," he muttered, lifting her against his chest. "If you die out here, no one will ever know." The wind outside screamed as he carried her from the ruined hangar. The desert plains stretched wide, littered with rusting towers and broken skimmers. Behind them, the hangar door banged shut again, sealing its silence. His cabin was little more than a patched module bolted into the side of the canyon wall. But the interior was warm, the fire core humming softly, casting a dull orange glow against the steel. Darren laid her gently onto the narrow cot and pulled a thermal blanket across her chest. Her hand still clutched the glowing shard, knuckles white with strain. He turned away, stoking the fire core higher and setting a small pot on the heat conduit. Nutrient broth simmered, the faint scent filling the room. He pulled out a chair, lit a worn-out stim stick, and sat. He said nothing. Time stretched. Her eyes, dark, alien, watchful, tracked his every move like a cornered predator measuring the cage. Finally, her trembling arm reached out for the bowl he placed near her. She drank in slow sips, never once looking away from him. You're not going to die, Darren said quietly, not turning his head. Not tonight. She didn't answer, only set the bowl down, clutching the crystal shard again. When night fell, the wind screamed through the canyon vents, rattling the metal plates of the cabin. Darren lay on the long bench, rifle within arm's reach. He could hear her shifting. She did not sleep. Instead, she leaned her head against the wall, eyes fixed on the cabin window. Every howl of the storm made her body tense like a bowstring drawn too tight. "No one's coming for your life here," he murmured hoarsely into the dark. Silence answered him. Near midnight, a dry cough shook her frame. Darren got up, poured water, and handed it to her. Her hand brushed his as she took it, and for the first time she whispered, soft, broken, almost too faint to hear, "Thank you." It was not the words that struck him, but the sound of her voice. It was melodic, trembling, as if the syllables themselves were not meant for human ears. First light. By morning, pale gold sunlight streamed through the viewport, cutting across her face. She still sat against the wall, clutching the shard, but her eyes no longer carried the same frantic panic as before. "You can't stay in that bed forever," Darren said quietly, stepping outside. Hours later, the sound of hammering and welding echoed from the yard. When he returned, he carried a frame built from scrap metal and old grav stabilizers, a crude hover chair. "Try sitting in this," he said. She eyed the contraption, suspicion burning in her gaze. He stepped forward, gently helping her into it. The stabilizers hummed, lifting her just above the ground. Push! Her fingers trembled on the control nodes, then steadied. The chair shifted forward, awkward at first, then smoother. For a fleeting moment, a faint smile flickered across her sun-darkened face. It was the first change of expression he had seen. Naming the stranger that evening, the storm returned, lashing rain against the metal walls. The fire core glowed red, painting their shadows across the cabin. "Do you have a name?" Darren asked, his deep voice breaking the silence. She hesitated, then nodded slowly. "Celera." The syllables curled in the air like a secret. Darren repeated it under his breath, tasting the alien sound. "Celera, it's different, beautiful." Her eyes lowered. "It means one who endures. But since my body failed, they called me something else. Burden. My kind left me in the borderlands to die." Darren was silent for a long time, the rain hammering the roof above. Finally, he said, "I lost everything once, wife, son. War took them both. After that, I stayed here, just working, trying to forget." The fire crackled. For the first time, Celera's gaze softened. "I used to think no one would pick me up unless it was to break me," she whispered. Darren leaned forward, gray eyes steady. "I don't need a slave here. All you need to do is live. The rest we'll figure out." Lightning flashed across her face, revealing scars traced like silver rivers across her temple. For the first time, she laughed softly, a sound fragile but real. And for the first time in years, the cabin didn't feel like a tomb. It felt like shelter, closing the image of Section 1. As dawn broke, the alien horizon shimmered with blue fire clouds sweeping across the sky. Celera wheeled her hover chair to the doorway. The storm had passed, leaving the ground damp, reflecting the strange light of the twin suns. Darren stepped beside her. For a moment, their silhouettes merged against the glow. The soldier who had lost everything and the alien warrior who had been left to die. Neither spoke. They simply stood there, side by side, the unspoken truth already humming in the space between them. Something had begun here, in the ruins of an abandoned outpost. Something both fragile and unbreakable. The nights on Varian 6 had a way of swallowing sound. Even the storms that tore across the canyons seemed to vanish after dusk, leaving only a silence so thick it pressed against the walls of the outpost like a living thing. Darren Valen had grown used to it. Solitude was safer than the noise of old memories. Yet tonight the silence wasn't empty. It was filled by the shallow breaths of the alien woman resting only a few steps away from him. Celera. The name still echoed in his mind, fragile and sharp at the same time. She hadn't moved much since dawn. Even with the hover chair, her body betrayed weakness. Every attempt to push herself left her trembling. Still, he noticed the fire in her eyes when she refused to collapse back into bed. She had endured too much already to let frailty win. Darren busied himself with repairs. The solar regulators had been failing again, and he spread tools across the table, pretending to focus. In truth, his attention drifted back to her again and again. Each time he found her gaze on him, watchful, wary, unrelenting, like a blade never lowered. She was watching him closely, waiting for the moment his expression shifted, waiting for the disgust, the fear. Instead, Darren leaned back slowly, exhaling through his teeth. They made you a weapon. Her silence was sharper than any confirmation. He met her gaze. But you're not one now. Celira's eyes widened just slightly. She looked as if she had expected anything. Anger, revulsion, rejection, but not acceptance. You don't understand, she whispered, voice breaking like glass. My very presence warps human minds. You feel compelled to protect me. It is not real. It is not your choice. That is why my kind abandoned me. A failed experiment, dangerous even to those who tried to love me. Her words struck deep, reverberating through the cabin like thunder. Darren stood there, gray eyes steady, fists clenched at his sides. Finally, he said, maybe that's true. Maybe I do feel something I shouldn't. But here's the thing, Celira. If I didn't want to protect you, you'd still be dying in that hangar. Her lips parted, but no sound came. The shard in her hand pulsed faintly, as though resonating with her heartbeat. For the first time, her gaze broke away from his, and her shoulders slumped, tension bleeding out of her frame. She whispered so softly he almost missed it. I don't know why you don't fear me. Darren's answer was simple. Because I've already lost everything. Protecting you is the first thing that's made me feel alive in years. The silence that followed wasn't heavy this time. It was fragile, like the beginning of something neither of them could yet name. Outside, the storms of Varian 6 raged on, tearing dust into the black sky. But within the cabin, two strangers, one human, one alien, both broken in different ways, sat beneath the glow of a dying fire. And for the first time, Celira set the shard down on the table instead of clutching it to her chest. Darren didn't move, he only watched. Because in that single gesture, he understood. Trust had begun to take root. And trust, on a world where nothing survived for long, was more dangerous than any weapon ever forged. The storms cleared by the third cycle, leaving the canyon still damp and breathing steam into the morning light. Darren worked on the ridge, welding a cracked support beam along the fence line, when the sound of engines cut across the horizon. Not the wind, not the natural groan of the outpost. Machines. Human machines. He set down the welder, scanning the distant haze. A small transport skimmed low over the rocks, its thrusters throwing up plumes of red dust. It was council issue, marked by the twin insignia of the Frontier Division. Darren's jaw tightened. He hadn't requested visitors. The transport settled near the old landing pad, its hatch open with a hiss, and out stepped Commander Hask-Wren, broad-shouldered, uniform crisp despite the dust. His eyes, pale and sharp as glass, locked on Darren immediately. Captain Valen, Hask called, striding forward with two soldiers flanking him. You've been difficult to reach. Darren wiped the sweat from his brow, gripping his welding tool a little tighter. Didn't know you were trying. Hask's gaze swept across the outpost, assessing every scar of rust and patch of scrap metal. His lip curled faintly, half amusement, half disdain. Place looks half dead. Surprised you haven't given up yet. Not my style, Darren muttered. Then before Hask could reply, a faint hum echoed from the cabin. Darren's stomach turned cold. He didn't need to look to know. The hover chair. Celira rolled into view, pausing at the threshold of the cabin door. The sunlight caught her pale skin, silver veins glimmering beneath the surface. Her black eyes locked on the strangers with razor suspicion. Hask stopped. His expression hardened. What the hell is that? She's not that, Darren said quickly, moving to stand between them. Her name's Celira. Hask's soldiers exchanged glances, hands brushing their weapons. The commander's stare narrowed, recognition dawning. I've seen reports. Elithari. That's impossible. They were purged. Celira's fingers clenched on the hover chair's controls, ready to retreat. Darren stepped closer, shielding her with his body. She's no threat. No threat? Hask barked a short laugh. Do you even know what she is, Valen? She's a weapon. A failed one, but still lethal. Elithari emit neurofields, warp human instincts. They make men reckless, obsessive. That's why the program was abandoned. That's why her kind were destroyed. Celira's breath caught, the words carved through her like blades, though her face remained cold. Darren glanced back, meeting her eyes. She already knew. Of course she knew. Council orders are clear, Haas continued. If one of them survived, it is to be terminated. Or delivered for dissection. He motioned to his men. Take her. The soldiers moved forward. Darren's rifle was in his hands before he'd even thought about it. The weapon hummed, its charge ready. He leveled it squarely at Hask. She's under my protection, Darren said, voice low and steady. The air froze. The soldiers hesitated, eyes flicking between their commander and the man who had once worn their same uniform. Hask raised a hand, halting them, but his expression darkened to stone. You've lost your mind, he hissed. You think she cares about you? You think your feelings are real? That's her field twisting your head. You're nothing but a puppet on her strings. Darren didn't flinch. Maybe. But the choice to stand here, that's mine. For the first time, Celira's mask cracked. Her eyes widened, something raw flickering across her face. She whispered something in her own tongue, a trembling sound, before quickly lowering her gaze again. Hask's lips thinned. He studied Darren, then Celira, as though calculating. Finally, he gave a cold smile. Fine. Keep your pet for now, but don't say you weren't warned. The council won't be as patient as I am. He signaled to his men, and the transport's engines roared back to life. Within minutes, the ship lifted, trailing dust into the sky until it was gone. The silence left behind felt heavier than the storm. Celira's hoverchair trembled faintly as she moved back inside the cabin. Darren followed, setting his rifle on the table. You should have let them take me, she said at last. Her voice was flat, but her hands shook as they rested on the shard. You've only made yourself a target now. Not the first time, Darren replied, lowering himself onto the bench. He rubbed a hand across his jaw. And I'm not about to watch them carve you apart because some experiment went wrong decades ago. You don't understand, she said sharply. Her eyes burned, violet fire flickering. Every time you look at me, every time you feel the urge to keep me safe, it isn't real. It's my field. It forces you. You think it's your choice, but it's not. You're protecting a lie. Darren met her gaze steadily. And if it is? If everything I feel is manufactured, then I'll still choose it. Because I haven't wanted to protect anything in years, not since, his voice faltered, not since I lost them. Celira's breath caught. She had expected anger, denial, maybe even disgust. Not this, not acceptance of the very flaw that had made her an outcast. She turned her face away, eyes wet, but refusing to let tears fall. You're a fool. Probably, Darren said softly. Silence fell again, filled only by the hum of the fire core, but it wasn't the same silence as before. This one carried weight, something fragile, something breaking open. Later that night, Celira pushed herself into the yard. She guided the hoverchair over the uneven ground, stopping near the edge of the canyon. The stars stretched endless above, glittering like shards of broken crystal. Darren followed at a distance, leaning against the post. They will come back, she said quietly. Not just him. More. The council cannot allow me to exist. They will send soldiers, hunters. They will burn this outpost to ash. Darren's eyes followed the stars. Then we'll be ready. Celira turned toward him, disbelief etched across her face. Why? You owe me nothing. You could walk away and save yourself. His gaze dropped to her, steady, unwavering. Because when I found you in that hangar, I thought you were already dead. And for the first time in years, I felt something when you opened your eyes. That's reason enough. Her breath shuddered. She lowered her gaze, whispering, You're the first human who didn't fear me. The words hung between them, trembling, dangerous. Darren didn't move closer. He simply let the silence hold them both, the canyon wind carrying the unspoken promise through the night. The next morning, he began fortifying the outpost. Reinforced shutters, charged defenses, hidden caches of ammunition. Salira helped as best she could, passing tools, recalibrating drones, her fingers surprisingly skilled with alien circuitry. At one point, as she leaned close to hand him a power cell, her hand brushed his. A spark, unintentional, but neither of them pulled away immediately. The moment passed, but the echo lingered. As dusk fell, Salira sat by the fire, her shard resting on the table beside her. For the first time since he had found her, she wasn't holding it tight. She looked across the flames at Darren, her eyes deep and unreadable. "They will come for us," she said softly. "Then let them," he answered. And in the flicker of firelight, something unspoken passed between them. An alliance stronger than fear, born not of compulsion, but of choice. The outpost had never been quiet, not really. It creaked with the weight of the canyon winds, whispered with the hum of failing generators, groaned beneath the pressure of storms. But that night the silence was unnatural. Too still, too heavy. Darren sat by the window with his rifle across his knees, eyes scanning the darkness beyond the fence line. His chest ached where the old scars tightened each time he drew a breath. But the ache wasn't from the wounds of war. It was anticipation, sharpened into dread. Salira was beside the fire. She had strapped a short blade to her thigh, its crystalline edge glinting in the glow. Her fingers moved with steady precision, running cloth over the weapon until it gleamed. Her eyes were calm now, eerily so, like the still surface of water before a storm breaks it apart. "They will come," she said quietly. "They already have," Darren replied. And then the sound carried through the night, the thunder of engines, the grind of metal boots on stone. Horses didn't ride these plains anymore, but the rhythm was the same, an army advancing. Darren rose, sliding the rifle strap over his shoulder. He glanced once at Salira. She gave the smallest nod, her hand tightening on the blade. The first glow of torches appeared in the distance, artificial firelight cutting through the darkness. A dozen shadows, maybe more, spread wide across the canyon floor. Then came the amplified voice, rough and commanding, tearing through the silence. "Valen," the shout echoed, "bring the alien out." "This is your last chance." Darren stepped onto the porch, the boards groaning under his boots. He called back, voice steady, "Go home. There's no one here for you." A laugh carried in reply, cruel and sharp. "You think you can defy the council? Don't be a fool. Surrender her, and we'll let you keep your worthless station." A single rifle cracked. The shot tore a chunk of wood from the post beside Darren's head. He ducked back, heart hammering. Gunfire erupted, red bolts slicing through the night, searing across the walls of the cabin. Salira slid beside him, pressing her shard into his hand. "Load," she said simply, tossing him a fresh clip she had scavenged earlier. The air exploded with the stench of plasma fire. Darren fired back, his shots cutting across the yard, driving two men to the ground. Soldiers scattered, shouting orders. Torches flaring as they closed in. Salira's chair hummed as she maneuvered to the doorway, blade in hand. Her body trembled, but her eyes burned with violet fire. One soldier rushed forward, rifle raised. Salira lifted her free hand. The air shimmered. A wave of pressure slammed into the attacker, hurling him back into the dirt. His weapon clattered uselessly. The others froze for a heartbeat, stunned. Then chaos erupted. Darren swore under his breath, "You didn't tell me you could do that." Salira's voice was calm, deadly. "I didn't remember until now." The next wave came harder. Torches lit the cabin walls in flickering gold. Darren ducked and fired again, his rifle carving sparks off armor. Salira launched her hover chair forward, blade flashing. She cut low, fast, the crystalline edge slicing clean through a soldier's gauntlet. He screamed, collapsing. Another tried to flank her. She pivoted sharply, the chair's stabilizers humming as she swung her blade in a vicious arc, catching him across the chest plate. Sparks exploded, the soldier staggering back, clutching at the rent in his armor. Darren covered her flank, each shot deliberate, cold, merciless. Together, they moved in rhythm, not rescuer and rescued anymore, but partners, standing back to back in the firelight. A plasma bolt struck Darren's shoulder, spinning him into the doorway. Pain seared white through his vision. He dropped to one knee, gritting his teeth. Celera wheeled to him instantly, blade dripping with crimson light. "Stay down." "Not happening," he growled, forcing himself up again. The yard was chaos, shouts, smoke, the hiss of burning metal. Council soldiers pushed forward, but for every step they gained, Darren and Celera pushed them back. Blood and fire painted the night. At last, a voice cut through the noise. Haskren stepped from the shadows, rifle in hand, his pale eyes gleaming. "Enough!" The soldiers hesitated, falling back slightly, their commander's authority still stronger than Sir Fear. Hask raised his weapon, sight trained on Celera. "You chose your side, Valen," he shouted. "Don't regret it." He fired. Celera moved before Darren could react. The bolt tore past, grazing her arm. She hissed, spinning her blade, and hurled it in a single fluid motion. The crystalline edge sliced through the air, striking Hask's rifle, shattering it into fragments. Sparks exploded across his chest. He stumbled back, stunned but still standing. "You'll burn for this!" Hask roared. "Both of you!" His soldiers hesitated again, fear flickering in their eyes. Their commander had been disarmed. Their enemy stood defiant in the doorway, bloodied but unbroken. Finally, Hask snarled, motioning them back. The transport engines roared. One by one, the soldiers retreated, dragging their wounded. Within minutes, the torches dimmed, the engines lifted, and the canyon fell silent once more. Darren leaned heavily against the doorway, blood soaking his sleeve. Celera wheeled to his side, grabbing a strip of cloth from the table. Without a word, she bound his wound, her fingers steady despite the tremor in her arms. "You kept your word," she whispered. His gray eyes met hers, tired but unwavering. "From now on, this is your home. No one touches you." The fire inside the cabin burned low, casting long shadows across the wall. Two silhouettes remained, one tall and scarred, the other seated but unbroken. Outside, the canyon wind carried the scent of smoke and blood. Inside, for the first time, there was something else, a fragile, unspoken promise forged in the heart of battle. At dawn, Celera rolled her chair onto the porch. The sun's first light gilded her dark hair, her eyes no longer only wary but steady, fierce. Darren joined her, his arm bound, his stance still strong. Together they watched the horizon. The outpost no longer felt like forgotten ruin. It felt like something worth defending. And Celera, once abandoned, once broken, was no longer a burden left behind. She had chosen to stay. The outpost smelled of ash. Smoke lingered in every corner, clinging to the steel walls, seeping into the fabric of the cots and the cracks in the floor. Outside, the canyon was quiet, the kind of silence that only follows blood. The council's soldiers were gone, but the memory of them remained. Scorch marks on the porch, shattered torches scattered across the dirt, and faint trails of red where men had fallen. Darren stood in the yard, his shoulder tightly bound, every movement reminding him of the wound. He was alive, but he had the familiar heaviness of a man who knew the fight wasn't over. Councilmen didn't retreat forever. They would come back with more soldiers, heavier guns, and orders to burn the outpost to the ground. Celera sat near the fence line in her hover chair, watching him. The pale morning light glowed against her skin, her silver scars catching the sun like thin rivers of molten metal. She hadn't spoken much since the fight. Her eyes were clear but distant, fixed on the horizon as if searching for something beyond it. Finally, she said, "They'll return, and next time we won't survive." Darren met her gaze, his gray eyes steady. "Then we don't wait for them." She frowned. "What do you mean?" He turned back toward the cabin, where the old comms unit flickered faintly on the table. "This place isn't worth dying over." "Not anymore. The council won't stop until you're ashes, and I'm not giving them that satisfaction." Celera's fingers brushed against the shard lying in her lap. The crystal pulsed faintly, catching the light. "So you'll run? Abandon your home?" Darren looked around at the battered outpost, the patched walls, the scars etched into every surface. "This isn't home." "Not really. It's a cage I built for myself. You gave me a reason to walk out of it." Her lips parted, but she said nothing. For the first time, she didn't clutch the shard with desperation. Instead, she held it gently, almost with reverence, as if its weight no longer bound her. That evening, they worked in silence, dismantling what they could. Darren hauled power cells, fuel rods, and weapon caches into the old freighter buried beneath the hangar. Celera rewired its failing engines with delicate precision, her hands moving with a familiarity that surprised even her. Each spark lit her face in the gloom, revealing something fierce and alive behind her calm. As night fell, Darren stood outside the freighter, looking at the stars. The galaxy stretched endless above them, sharp and cold. He had fought under those same stars years ago, killing men who had no names, watching comrades burn in ships that once promised safety. Now, for the first time, he wondered if those same stars might carry something else. Hope. Celera joined him, her hover chair humming softly as it rolled across the dust. She stopped beside him, tilting her face upward. Her eyes reflected the constellations like pools of shadow laced with fire. "Where would you go?" she asked. "Anywhere they aren't," Darren replied. Her gaze lingered on him. "Do you even know what you're offering?" "I am hunted. Every human settlement has orders to kill or capture me. You'll be branded a traitor, a deserter. You'll lose everything." He turned his head, meeting her eyes in the starlight. "I already lost everything. You're the first thing I've found worth keeping." The words silenced her. Her breath hitched, and for once she looked away, her composure cracking. Her hands trembled faintly against the controls of the chair, but her voice, when it came, was soft and unsteady. "You shouldn't say things like that. Not when you don't know if it's really you or just in my field bending your will." Darren stepped closer, close enough that the glow of her silver veins lit faint patterns across his chest. His hand lifted slowly, brushing a loose strand of her dark hair back from her face. "Then let it be the field," he whispered. "I don't care. Because I know what choice feels like, Celera, and I'm making it right now." Her eyes widened, locked on his, and in that moment, the silence between them broke. She tilted her head just enough, and their lips met. Not rushed, not desperate, but slow, inevitable, as though every hour since the hangar had led to this breath. When they parted, her forehead leaned lightly against his, her violet gaze shimmering with something fragile. "You're the first human who didn't fear me. And you're the first reason I've had to live," he murmured. The words bound them in a way no council decree could sever. At dawn, the freighter's engines roared back to life, coughing dust into the sky. Darren guided the ship's systems while Celera secured the navigation grid, her shard resting beside the console. For the first time, she had set it down without hesitation. The outpost shrank behind them, a skeleton of steel and rust fading into the canyon mist. Darren didn't look back. Neither did Celera. As the freighter broke through the clouds, the twin suns of Vayrorion 6 rose, flooding the cockpit with golden light. Celera's face caught the glow, softening the scars, turning her features into something both alien and achingly human. She reached for the shard, then stopped, letting her hand rest instead against the console between them. "Where now?" she asked. Darren's hands gripped the controls, steady as stone. "Wherever we choose." Celera's lips curved into the faintest smile. "Then I choose to stay. Not as your burden, but as your equal." The stars opened before them, infinite and untamed. Behind them lay a world of ash and silence, of cages and abandonment. Ahead stretched the promise of freedom, fragile, dangerous, but theirs. In the quiet hum of the freighter, Darren reached across the console, his calloused hand brushing hers. She did not pull away. Her fingers curled into his, firm and sure. No council command, no war, no scar of the past could unmake that choice. And as the freighter vanished into the starlit horizon, two broken souls, one human, one alien, had already begun to write something new. Not survival, not exile, but a home carved out of trust, defiance, and love that refused to die.